Have you been afraid of fruit for years, yet diabetes has continued to progress quietly? If the problem is not sugar itself, but a deep blockage inside your body, then everything you have believed may need to be re-examined from the beginning. My name is Ethan Marshall, a 60-year-old physician working in the field of health in the United States, and I'm going to say something blunt that may shock many people. A great number of people do not develop diabetes because they eat too much fruit, but because they have been afraid of fruit for far too long. Before we go any further, if you are seriously concerned about your health in midlife or later years, please subscribe to the channel, hit like, and share this video to support us in continuing to create high-quality, honest content that goes straight to the root of the problem. Over more than 30 years of medical practice, especially working with patients between the ages of 50 and 70, I have noticed a fear that is almost universal. The fear of sugar in fruit. Many people look at me with worry and say they have given up bananas, mangoes, grapes, even apples, simply because of the word diabetes. This fear did not arise out of nowhere. It has grown alongside the steadily rising statistics of type 2 diabetes, along with constant warnings about sugar, carbohydrates, and insulin. The problem is that, in this wave of panic, fruit, one of humanity's oldest natural foods, has been lumped together with candy, soda, and refined sugar. I have met many patients who proudly say they eat very healthy, having avoided fruit for years, yet their health indicators have quietly continued to worsen. This raises an uncomfortable but unavoidable question. If fruit were truly the culprit, why does health fail to improve? The more fruit is avoided. We are living in an era in which people eat more than ever before, yet fear natural food more than ever before. Fruit, once a symbol of life, has gradually become something suspicious, something measured, scrutinized gram by gram for its sugar content. Ironically, at the same time, processed foods, refined starches, and industrial fats have quietly worked their way into daily meals. When looking back at the nutritional history of humankind, I often ask my patients one question. If our ancestors lived for thousands of years on fruit, vegetables, and natural foods without a diabetes epidemic, what has truly changed? Has fruit changed? Or have our bodies and internal environment changed? Most of today's fear of fruit does not come from the body's direct experience, but from fragmented, context-poor information repeated often enough to become belief. And when a belief takes deep root, people are willing to sacrifice even what once nourished them in exchange for a sense of safety. Before you continue listening to the next parts, I want you to pause for a moment and ask yourself, where do you think the main cause of this fear of fruit comes from? A. Fruit itself is truly dangerous. Or B. The modern body is no longer in a state where it can properly process what is inherently natural? Comment A or B below. I truly want to know where you stand in this story. The greatest confusion in today's nutritional debates lies in the fact that many people talk about sugar as if it were a single concept, while in reality there are two groups of sugar with completely different physiological natures. Natural fructose in fruit never exists on its own. It always comes with soluble fiber, structured water, vitamins, minerals, and living enzymes, forming a complete biological system. This structure slows absorption, allowing sugar to be released gradually and processed by the body in a stable context. In contrast, refined sugar and concentrated forms of sugar in processed foods are almost entirely stripped of these biological buffers. When they enter the body, they trigger rapid, intense, and abrupt reactions, forcing the metabolic system to respond under stress. The key point does not lie in chemical formulas alone, but in how sugar interacts with its surrounding physiological environment. In natural nutritional systems described in classical health literature, fruit is considered a self-regulating food because its high fiber and water content create early satiety and limit overconsumption. Refined sugar and products containing hidden sugars, on the other hand, can bypass the body's natural control mechanisms, leading to excessive intake without a sense of fullness. Another important aspect is how these two types of sugar affect the digestive and eliminative systems. Natural sugar in fruit, when paired with fiber, supports intestinal movement and waste elimination, while refined sugar often contributes to unfavorable fermentation and residue accumulation. Physiological observations show that blood sugar response depends not only on the amount of sugar consumed, but also on the food context and the state of the digestive system at the time. Therefore, attributing all metabolic problems to fruit based solely on sugar content is an oversimplified and inaccurate approach. The difference between these two types of sugar also reflects the difference between natural food and industrial products. One is designed by nature to match human physiology. The other is refined for preservation, flavor, and profit. Ignoring this distinction easily leads to the mistaken conclusion that all sources of sugar have the same effect, resulting in unbalanced nutritional choices. Understanding the fundamental difference between sugar in fruit and refined sugar is not meant to encourage uncontrolled consumption, but to place the issue in its proper biological context. Only when we recognize that not all sugar is the same can the role of fruit in the diet be evaluated objectively, scientifically, and in alignment with how the human body truly functions. From Arnold Ehret's perspective, when discussing diabetes, the most important question is not where does sugar come from, but can sugar actually reach the cells? He argued that diabetes is not a problem of sugar intake, but the result of a prolonged blockage within the circulatory system and cellular tissues. Under normal physiological conditions, natural sugar is transported through tiny capillaries to nourish cells, where it is used as energy. However, when these vessels become gradually coated with long-accumulated mucus and waste, transport capacity is severely reduced. According to Ehret, mucus is not a random phenomenon, but the byproduct of prolonged consumption of refined starches, dense fats, and overly cooked foods that produce residues difficult to eliminate. When the internal environment becomes thick and poorly circulated, sugar may be present in the blood, but cannot be effectively absorbed by the cells, leading to elevated blood sugar levels. In that context, the pancreas and insulin are often seen as the culprits, but from this approach, they are merely responding to a system obstructed at its foundation. Ehret used the image of a clogged engine to describe this state. No matter how good the fuel is, an engine cannot run smoothly if its pipes are blocked. From this viewpoint, continuing to blame sugar, especially natural sugar in fruit, only diverts attention away from the core cause. This perspective also helps explain a common real-world phenomenon. Many people drastically reduce fruit and sugar, yet their metabolic condition does not significantly improve and may even worsen over time. According to Ehret's reasoning, when natural foods are removed while the underlying blockage remains, the body not only fails to be liberated, but also loses elements that support cleansing. Diabetes, within this framework, is not an isolated incident, but the cumulative result of many years of operating in a blocked state. Only by recognizing that the issue lies in circulation structure and the body's internal environment, can the approach to diabetes shift from symptom management to addressing its physiological roots. In a comprehensive approach to metabolic disorders, the relationship between the eliminative system and the body's ability to use sugar plays a central yet often overlooked role. Analyses in specialized literature on colon health show that when elimination function weakens, particularly in the colon, waste removal becomes inefficient, leading to prolonged internal toxicity. In this state, the blood is no longer an optimal transport medium, but becomes a carrier of byproducts from fermentation and decomposition, directly affecting cellular metabolism. This decline does not occur in isolation. It places increasing strain on the liver and pancreas, the two central organs in blood sugar regulation. The liver, responsible for coordinating and storing energy, is forced to prioritize detoxification, reducing the efficiency of glucose metabolism. The pancreas, in this context, does not act independently, but responds to an internal environment already overloaded. Physiological observations presented in natural nutritional systems show that when elimination pathways are blocked, the body tends to reduce its ability to receive and use energy, regardless of its source. As a result, blood sugar disorders often accompany symptoms such as chronic constipation, poor peripheral circulation, and persistent fatigue. In this context, reducing the burden on digestion and elimination is considered a foundational adjustment. Methods of reasonable fasting and dietary simplification, as described in classical literature, are not intended to create deficiency, but to allow the body to reestablish its physiological priorities. When mucus-forming foods are reduced, the internal environment gradually becomes more open, improving tissue sensitivity to glucose. In this transition process, fruit is often placed in the role of a transitional food due to its light nature, high water content, and ease of assimilation, supporting cleansing without adding burden. In this framework, fruit is not a disruptive factor, but part of the adjustment process when used appropriately. Metabolic improvement, therefore, does not arise from forcibly controlling blood sugar by eliminating a specific food group, but from restoring the harmonious function of the entire eliminative and metabolic system. When elimination pathways are cleared and regulatory organs are freed from prolonged overload, the body's ability to use energy tends to improve naturally and sustainably. In the broader picture of metabolic disorders, observations from clinical practice reveal a striking commonality. Improvement does not come from tightening restrictions or further eliminating natural food groups, but from changing the internal physiological context. Long-term follow-up cases show that when diets are adjusted to reduce mucus-forming foods while supporting elimination and digestion, the body's response to sugar tends to shift in a positive direction. In such contexts, ripe fruit is reintroduced cautiously, not as a stimulus, but as part of the process of restoring balance. The improvements observed do not occur abruptly, but follow the pace of cleansing and physiological recovery. This reinforces a consistent principle. The body responds differently to the same input depending on its internal state. When the internal environment remains blocked, surface-level adjustments are only temporary. When foundational systems are freed, the body's self-regulatory capacity gradually returns. The core message drawn from these observations is not to deny the role of dietary control, but to reposition the focus of the issue. Continuing to view fruit or natural sugar as the direct cause of diabetes easily leads to a cycle of fear and exclusion, while the underlying cause remains unresolved. The fuel and engine analogy clarifies this relationship. Fuel, no matter how appropriate, cannot perform its function if the operating system is blocked. Therefore, the focus of adjustment lies not in constantly changing the fuel, but in restoring the system's ability to operate smoothly. When elimination pathways improve and regulatory organs are freed from prolonged overload, the body tends to process energy more efficiently and stably. The conclusion drawn from this entire line of reasoning is a shift in perspective. Instead of asking whether a natural food causes disease, the more relevant question concerns the physiological conditions under which that food is consumed. Only by understanding that the core issue lies in the body's internal state can the approach to diabetes and metabolic health move from symptom management towards sustainable systemic adjustment. After this entire analytical journey, the central message becomes very clear. Diabetes and metabolic disorders cannot be properly understood if the focus remains on a single factor, such as sugar in fruit. Fear of fruit arises from increasing disease prevalence and context-poor information. While the fundamental difference between natural sugar and refined sugar is often overlooked, Ehret's perspective points to prolonged blockage in the circulatory system and cellular tissues as the root cause preventing sugar from being effectively used. When connected to the roles of the colon, liver, and eliminative system, it becomes evident that metabolism improves only when the internal environment is cleansed and regulatory organs are freed from overload. Fruit, in an appropriate context, is not a disruptive agent, but part of the adjustment process. Once the focus is correctly placed on restoring the smooth operation of the entire bodily system, the deeper lesson is that health is not determined by how many foods are eliminated, but by the state of the body that receives them. Rather than reacting with fear and extreme restriction, a more practical approach is to observe one's digestive and eliminative systems as a whole, gradually reduce long-term burdens, and allow the body to self-regulate. In daily life, this may begin with simpler eating, paying attention to how the body feels after each change, and prioritizing the restoration of foundational functions instead of chasing surface-level numbers. In your view, what matters more in preventing and improving diabetes, controlling food intake, or improving the body's internal state? Please respectfully share your perspective in the comments. If you would like to go deeper on the healing path and understand your body in a more systematic way, please fill out the form in the description to receive a free Healing Health ebook. And don't forget to subscribe, hit like, and share this video to support us in continuing to create valuable and meaningful content.